What's going on, everybody? Welcome to 10 Minutes on Brand. I'm Will Straughn, Chief Growth Officer here at Focus Lab. And today we're going to be talking about color palettes and how they play within visual identities. I'm excited to have on the call today Bill Kenney, Chief Creative Officer here at Focus Lab.
What's up, everybody? Excited to chat.
Bill, the rules to 10 Minutes on Brand is pretty simple. We're going to be talking about 3 questions. I'm going to be asking you 3 questions. We've got 10 minutes. We got to cover all of this in 10 minutes. I feel pretty good. 10 minutes goes by, but oftentimes it doesn't. It's a little bit slower than you'd really think. So let's dive in. All right, Bill, first question. How much value would you say color palettes play within a brand's visual identity?
All right. Good question. There's a variety of different ways you can look at this. All in all, it just depends on the brand. So there are big brands that we all know and appreciate where color plays a really large part in the brand identity and the visual identity system. Examples of those would be, let's think Tiffany's with their teal blue. Let's think UPS with their brown. And the list goes on, and I guess that's only 2 examples. There's going to be a gajillion different examples. FedEx, kind of like purpley and orange. Like there are these very key brands that color is a pretty instrumental part in what we recognize as far as the brand system. So therefore they are valuable as far as distinction and recognition. But there's plenty of other brands that their system is not reliant on color. Examples of those off the top of my head, let's say Apple, Nike even. Nike does have a brand color. Most people probably aren't aware of it. It is that orange, if you recall those like orange sneaker boxes from like back in the day. Yeah. But really, like if you look at their ads and stuff, they're not covered in orange everywhere. So there's a lot of brands like that are pretty neutral in their foundation. And then they want to use color in different ways through marketing. You think Apple, pretty basic in gray and white, but then with Apple Music and iPod releases and stuff like that, they get really colorful and they have fun with it. So there is a lot of value to color, though. Let's not forget, like color is an important part of the visual identity system, just different degrees of value.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, colors, brands and colors that always have been really sticky with me is number one for me is always Coca-Cola. It's just like when I think of Coca-Cola, I think of that red.
Yeah.
Even all the way through all of their like sub products like Diet Coke and Coke Zero, that red is always very apparent.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting with Apple. I never really, like, if you ask me, like, what's Apple's primary color? I would be stumped. I had never really thought about that, but that's really interesting. So when they don't have a primary color that they use as like a differentiator, they lean on other assets, like they lean on other attributes of the brand.
Yes. Good point. You're picking up on something that's really good to pick up on, which is something in the brand's identity system has to carry weight and tell story. So for everybody, it's different. Some people it's color, which can provide emotion and these other types of feelings. And for other brands, it might be photography. So because Apple basically, essentially like a hardware company, but really it's a software technology company and all these other things, but product is a big part of their emotional appeal. So, imagery of iPhones and laptops and AirPods, like that's where they're going to get you, not in, a color palette.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, this is going to lead right into my second question, I think pretty beautifully. And this happened organically. We didn't set this up.
Let's do this.
So what do you do if you're going through a rebrand and within the competitive landscape, all the colors are taken and there's not a true opportunity to stand out with color?
Yeah. So, having worked with a ton of companies now, and specifically like in the B2B space, you often find that many of the organizations are kind of like fighting for the same palette in a way. In tech, you've got a lot of blues, right? So there can quickly be this like, oh no, there's no colors left. In our little competitive landscape, if we just looked at the small grouping, every color is accounted for: blue, purple, yellow. There's usually one outlier in there. It's usually such an outlier that the companies aren't even willing to go with it. Not every company is comfortable being yellow or purple, for instance. Safer colors are generally the greens and the blues and sometimes the reds. But, it's kind of like, it's not the end of the world if there is not an exact color for you, because again, it's only one part of the visual identity system. It's just one ingredient. So that's saying, like, if you ordered a cake from down the street and you order it from this other competitor over here, they both use sugar. That's one ingredient that is similar, but eventually in the recipe, there is something that maybe makes them more unique. So if you think about color, yes, Twitter and Facebook are both blue, as are a gajillion other tech companies, but that doesn't mean that we now, as the customer or the consumer, can't understand why they're different just because they're blue. Like, we understand that they are different for other reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you got to stick within the same palette. There's always opportunity to make it unique though. A blue can shift in, varying degrees to being more purpley, more greenish. You can still get away from competition, even though technically you might say their brand color is blue.
All right, Bill, last question. When you're working with clients on a rebrand, specifically with color palettes and selecting a color, what are some of the common situations that people fall into when selecting? Like, what are some of the maybe issues or areas of concerns that they'll fall into?
So let me noodle on this for a minute. There's two things that come immediately to mind. I think the first one, and this goes beyond color within our projects, there's a tendency to stay close to home or stay safe, right? Which is totally understandable. We have empathy for our partners in that process of saying, like, well, you've been blue for a long time. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to stay blue. How much equity do you have in that color palette? Is there actually opportunity and therefore value to get away from it and go into something else? So I think there is a tendency to want to stay safer, where we as a creative organization, we have a larger appetite for kind of like crazier color palettes. So that is, to label it an issue is probably, it's not really an issue, but it's a reality of the process to say, like, okay, here, we're going to like push you into this purpley area. And it's like, oh, purpley is, all the other feelings that come with purple to them, right? Because it's a personal bias to them. Purple might feel very feminine, or it might feel too playful or something. And we have to show the value of why going in that direction is helpful. So playing it safe, I think, is the first thing that stands out. And then I guess I kind of just touched on it, but this idea of like personal bias.
Gotcha.
Just because the people that we're working with within the organization like green doesn't mean that green is right for the product or the brand, right? So you have to continue to like draw these different lines to say, like, okay, you might not like what's been presented to you. Let's talk about why. Is it because you don't have an appetite for green? But let's talk about your customers, right? You have to like continue to reconnect. It's just really hard. And that's another thing that we understand and we're empathetic to. Like, you have to remind people, get out of yourself and put yourself actually in the customer's seat. What types of stuff do they engage with? What colors might they like? That's who we're trying to get to. So it's kind of like a constant realignment of perspective throughout the process.
Dude, that's fantastic. All right, well, we've got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to throw on a hot take. Bill, what is your favorite color? And I think we got 2 minutes, so you only got a little bit of time here.
So my favorite color seems to be shape shifting. Ironically, I didn't plan to do this, but for a long time, my favorite color, I've claimed it as red. And I happen to be wearing a awesomely red shirt. Focus Lab is red. There's your personal bias.
Okay.
So red, all the things. But having said that, like, if I bought a car, I wouldn't buy a red car ever. So I don't know. To even say it's my favorite color, I think is a sham. But the color I seem to be attracted to lately is green. I really am loving greens. My new bike is like this, like military-ish green, like this olive drab, like matte green. I love it. My new iPhone is that like dark forest green that they came out with. So I'm trending into an all things green type of. Right. I think it's the older me.
All right. The next evolution of Bill is green. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. This is our first episode of 10 Minutes on Brand. If you guys enjoyed this, go ahead and go over to the Focus Lab YouTube account, subscribe, leave us a comment, give us a like. Let us know what you think about this, and let us know what else you'd like us to talk about on the next 10 Minute on Brand. Again, thanks so much. My name is Will Straughn. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Focus Lab, and I was really great and really excited to have Bill Kenney, a business partner and Chief Creative Officer, with us today. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thank you, man. Bye.